Welcome back to another episode of the GM Future Podcast. I'm your host, Luis Duque, and today I bring a conversation with Peter Atherton. He is the founder of Actions Proof, a company and an organization that is helping engineers, engineer leaders, CEOs, and a lot of people navigate the career. I think that's an important topic, and that's where I really want to start this conversation with you, Peter. Do you want to just tell us what your company does, what you have done in the industry, as well as some of the activities that you are working on right now?
Yes, well, it's great to see you, Luis, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. So I'm a fully recovered practicing engineer. I like to say I'm a little bit in jest, but the first 24 years of my career, I was a practicing civil engineer, and went from project engineer to a large organization. After about 5 years, shifted to what was a small organization at the time, and I quickly moved into the ranks of project management, and a vice president principal and a major owner. And we grew that small firm to a mid-sized firm across the whole New England region into New York and Florida. Um, and it was absolutely great. I loved all of it until I didn't. And there was a whole kind of story behind that, and that I realized after the fact that I had burned out. And but so after realizing before 5 years before I exited my professional consulting practice, I realized I didn't want to, there was something off. I didn't really want to do this for the next 20, 25 years. And I had started an exit strategy program with my partners. And so that took about 5 years. And I took a year off. I realized at that time I had burned out. I ended up writing a book on burnout and really how to prevent it, how to be a high achiever and still, how to still be a high achiever and prevent burnout. And in that process, I realized I still, I at the time I didn't love what I did, but then I fell back in love with the AEC industry, and so I reconstituted myself as a management consultant. And today I started at the time I started Actions Prove, and today, and for the last 5 years, I've been doing management consulting, primarily for small to mid-sized firms, and doing strategic planning, leadership and management team development, corporate impact design. And for leaders I get to know, I'll also do executive coaching, and I also have mastermind programs.
Yeah, so you basically have done everything from just a design engineer to a company owner. Now you have your own business. How has that transition from each stage? What are some of the biggest challenges you have faced when you compare that engineering career, more the technical side, now that you're working on your own company, your own business, doing more of the soft skills, more of the training, the management? How those two fields really compare, and what have been some of those challenges that you faced during that transition?
Well, I love all of it, and I break it into this different seasons. And so, coming out of school, um, I didn't come from a ton of money, and my folks were struggling at the time. I mean, I made it through school, but I had debt coming out of school, so I wanted to practice. And I am a high achiever. I mean, things you learn, kind of reflect back. Like I've always been a high achiever, and when I got out of school, I wanted to learn and to grow and do engineering things. And fortunately, I had great opportunities, I had great mentors, but I loved for a season the technical, really mastering my craft. And coming out of school, it's like you don't realize what you don't know, but with the right counsel, you really understand things. And I really wanted to, in this first 10 years of my career, master my craft. And then it got to a point where I wanted to make a name. And I really loved the management aspects and the learning how to lead a team. And I didn't not like the technical because I could always jump right in because I really knew the technical. That, I mean, in fact, it was sometimes hard to get out of the technical because I really
Mhm.
enjoyed the technical. But getting into leadership and management aspects, I thought was phenomenal. And then that led to the opportunity to understand business and not just writing proposals, but what it takes to win a proposal and win a client's trust and the business aspects of running a firm and worrying about certain things. I really grew to love the business aspects. So it's really kind of had a passion of dialing into what the season is and kind of what your goals are in that season. And I really think that makes a difference because if I look back over time, like where there was a disconnect was the sort of the maturation I had or the change from, make a name for myself to really make a difference
Mhm.
in the industry, make a difference for people. And I had this transition from really focusing on success with projects and profits to really, and then not having the language at the time to really say, you know what, people and purpose are what matters. And that's what I really like. I never understood it. It took a little bit of separation. It took my time off for me to really zone in on, wow, I really love people and purpose as much as projects and profits. And actually, when you think about it, the people and the purpose allow you to access the project success and the profitability as a firm. And I got that a little bit backwards at first. And it's so again, maybe it was my maturation, or maybe it was just things have changed, like the actual business climate, how people think about work and life, that has evolved at the same time too. And so, how it constitutes myself, I love being an entrepreneur. I love working with firms and leaders who really want to make a difference. And so that excites me. And so all of the passion I had for, advanced wastewater treatment facilities, collection system master plans, all of the civil engineering stuff that I was involved with, I have for organizational development and leadership and management team development.
Yeah, I think definitely is a different skill. You're using just a wide variety of skills to really do what you're doing right now. And that makes me think that you probably had coaches or mentors during that early stage of your or later stage of technical career that help you kind of make the leap to becoming an owner, a company owner. Uh, what role did they play during that career planning or strategic planning before you actually made the leap of becoming your owner, you start your own company and doing all the things you do right now?
It is interesting. If you talk to people who have had a fair degree of success, it typically comes from, well, I had great mentors that really kind of took me under their wing, and they helped me, and with my work ethic and their guidance, I was able to accomplish a lot, and that was 100% relevant in my career. Um, there's also people who were like, well, I had a terrible boss. I had a crappy situation that I was in, and I learned to figure it out on my own. And they became very successful because they didn't have people helping them. And so I so I learned from people who really invested in me, and I am truly grateful for that. But I was also cognizant of things that I don't want to be like that person. I don't want to do things like, I saw in this instance. And so, really gravitating to what's really good, and great models, but then also being cognizant of this is what I don't want to do, and then sort of using, both of those angles to sort of figure out. I think I triangulated between a lot of that, and I again, I know multiple people who, have had the path of great mentors, and it's worked out real well, probably with a lot less frustration. But then I know just as many people, I think, who did not have that, and just through hard work and seeking out mentorship in other places, not through their direct boss or people on their team, kind of figured it out. And it was, although it was might have been frustrating in the moment, later on, you've built some chops.
Yeah, and I think ultimately is up to the person to develop those skills and really pursue their passion, have a clear goal of what they want in their career to help get there where they want to go. The mentor, the coaches, the people around them are just tools that they can use to maybe get there faster, maybe find different perspectives that will help them guide their career in one way or another. But I think ultimately it's just the job of the engineer, the younger engineer, the student. They're trying to get somewhere to develop those skills and really have a career plan. Which brings me to what can we do as younger engineers to really hone in and have a really solid career plan that will guide us through challenges in work, challenges personally, different circumstances with the career, that is going to be solid enough that we can look up to that plan and follow it towards our ultimate career goal?
I mean, I think there's some critical thinking and strategic thinking that has to go into your career, just like firms do strategic planning. I think as an engineer, as a young professional, we have to do some strategic planning and also critical planning. So on the career front, I mean, I mentioned the seasons, and I didn't necessarily have this language going through it, but looking back now, I mean, there is really this phase to master your craft, and this could go, until you get licensed, right? If that's part of your career path, do you really know what it takes to have that bridge work and not fall down and not have like issues? Do you really understand? And we superficially know, we learned about it in school, but until you really know that you know how to do the job, and are you willing to stamp it and have the legal obligations
Mm.
associated with it, and have the standing in society just like physicians have and other professionals. We do things that really matter for public health, safety, and welfare. And until you really know that we should be driven to that level. So I think there's that personal drive that's going to be key to our success. And I think for the first 5 to 10 years of our career, we have to be technically driven. And then, once we have mastered that craft, we really get into making a name for ourselves. It's really about managing projects and making them successful from a you know um, cost perspective, a budget, schedule perspective, team development, getting the team involved, and there's that sort of make a name for yourself and help elevate the industry, help elevate your firm in the marketplace. And I think you have to have a drive for that. And nothing, I think, in this industry, that our personal drive is, it cannot be underestimated. I think there's such great opportunity here, and the work is of consequence that I don't think we really learn it unless we put the effort in. And I think that is a key consideration, for that. And so it's not just a matter of time in the seat. Well, I have 5 years experience, but yeah, well, do you have 1 year of experience that you've 5 years 5 times over, or do you really have 5 years of developing experience? So I mean, again, my disposition is, as a high achiever, go make it happen. And if your direct team isn't helping you, well, there's ways to sort of horizontally try to get that experience. But I think in most organizations, someone who really wants to learn and is taking on more will be recognized. And
So,
that's going to be a key aspect, I think, for all of our success.
so it's more of like feeling that you can start seeing that you're progressing within the company or within the work that you're doing, rather than there's a set number. After 4 or 5 years, you have the enough experience to design something. What has been your experience between that transition between just being more of a technical engineer that has a solid foundation in terms of engineering knowledge, when they are looking more into a management position, and how does that transition happen, as well as maybe what are some key indicators that someone is ready to make the transition?
I mean, if someone really has done something multiple times in a row, and you're to the point where I really understand this, but not only understand that, I've developed an enhanced spreadsheet to automate this calculation, or I've updated our technical specifications, or the way we write up our reports is this. So not only I've done it multiple times, but I've done it in a way that has enhanced the way we do it, created a great go by, created training materials for someone. At that point, you've really mastered that craft. And in our industry, like, so I think technical knowledge is valued, and so we can continue and be a technical master, right? How are we really going to continue with the changes in technology? I think we can continue down a technical path, but for those who are interested in the management, and a lot of times, because that's really been the only path to more financial success and notoriety, a lot of us say, well, we have to become project managers. And I think more that's changing in the industry. We value the technical expertise. But we really have to stay on top of technologies and again how they're applied and when they're applied. But for those who are looking for more, I mean this, I mean how many pump stations, unless you're a technical expert, I mean how many pump stations can you design where you're not going to get bored? And so and so you would expand to larger pump stations, and there would be things that would have to keep you enticed after you've done it multiple times. But for those who are interested in more management work, I think you have to just try it out. And firms that are helping an assistant project manager, well, here are the things that, instead of just planning out your work, well, what if you plan out the work of another discipline and help manage that through them? So there are ways to sort of get a sense of, wow, I really like this, or I want to do this, I'm not really good at it now, but how do I practice that? I think exploring is going to be key. There is this shift where, when I came through, I'm dating myself a little bit, but I'm got 30 years in the industry now, and there was one or maybe two paths, depending on, a technical
Mhm.
path and a managerial path. I mean, that was pretty much it. And I think today it's changing. I think the new generations are changing things. I've done a lot of research in, Generation Z, and the, sort of rejecting the corporate ladder, that there's a jungle gym. I want to try a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it's not just engineering. I wouldn't mind some marketing. I wouldn't mind understanding how we do this. And I think so firms that are allowing the taste testing are going to be much better off, because if you play this thing forward 15, 20 years into people's career, they're anyone who takes a management route are doing doer seller work. And so all of that, I
Mhm.
mean, a lot of us in my vintage, we struggled when we became managers and had to have, people skills. Well, what is that? And there's a lot of failures. And, then we do or seller, and we don't understand marketing. We don't understand sales. It's almost built into the process now that younger engineers and professionals, sort of, if you can have them dabble in some of those aspects by the time they get to the doer seller model, if that's the case, or a technical professional with great people skills, we're actually going to be much better off, because we need all those skills eventually
Mhm.
anyway. And it's just a matter of, do you want to struggle with them with 15 years experience, or do you want to sort of bake them into the cake early on? And it's really being clear, I think, on what you're looking for as a professional. And I think more and more, though, there is that coaching and mentorship of trying things out, and getting a flavor of, is this a natural tendency? Do you really like it? If it's not a natural tendency, but you really want to do it, well, let's develop those skills.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, and just hearing from you, knowing that you basically have lived through all of these transitions, and obviously now more than ever, I hear from other peers that they want to become a project manager. They are interested in just being a greater part of the company, of the business, of everything. But when they get there, they're surprised about all the other tasks and all the other responsibilities they have once they actually become a manager, that are not really related to the technical skills. They're more of managing people, talk with clients, like you were saying, selling and doing these marketing efforts that are beyond what they really were trained to as an engineer. What were some of your impressions when you became a manager, and some of the maybe not as common skills and responsibilities you had once you became that, yeah, once you made that transition?
Hmm. Well, I mean, this is where I benefited from having some great mentors, because even though I couldn't put a name to it, I didn't know I was leveraging people skills. I didn't
Mhm.
understand. I was just, this is how I was taught, so I'm going to teach someone else this way. This is how I watched meetings get conducted, so I'm going to conduct my meetings this way. There wasn't any training, it was all on the job. And fortunately, I probably had less missteps because I had just great mentors.
Mhm.
That's not the case with everybody. And now, and back in the day, back in the 90s, we had more time. There was, you had 7 years to develop a 7-year engineer. We don't have time today. Like, so we want to develop a 7-year engineer habits in 3 years. Well, you can't just do on the job training, hope you figure it out, maybe just in time mentoring. You have to be a little bit more proactive with that, anticipating things. So I think that that is one. one item where, I had some time to understand some of the people skills and learn to marketing, like go to like your first public meeting and make a presentation. I was watching people do it, and I was able to learn. And I don't know that people have the luxury of that much time today. So I remember one of when I first got out of school, I desperately wanted to work for the company Metcalf and Eddy. And at the time, they wrote the book on wastewater engineering, and most most contemporaries, that was the book they studied in college on wastewater engineering. And when I worked for them, I was so excited. I mean, that was sort of like the brand at the time, where I was, and so I was pretty pumped up. But I remember being probably a 2 years experience, and I had a really great team that I was on. But I remember being invited to a client meeting, and I was like, oh wow, like I get to
Mhm.
go to a client. But I was told in pretty much uncertain terms, you're going to the meeting, you're not to say anything other than hello and goodbye. And if you get asked a question, you're not going to answer it, you're going to defer, and you're going to take great notes. And we need those notes by the end of the day. But I remember being just so thrilled with that opportunity to just sit and observe how people were interacting with a client. And even back in that time, for certain people, we got invited to a principals meeting where you were just to be a fly on the wall to observe how business is done. Are there proposals? Is it a no? Is it a go no go? I had no idea what a proposal was, and why would you go or no go? And just to sit and observe. And I think, again, I had time to do that. The pace, we didn't have email at the time. We didn't have computers at our desks at the time. So that's how slow the world was. And now it's just the world is sped up. So we have to be very methodical about how we create those real learning environments for people so that we understand, because although we're exposed to a lot, it doesn't mean we know a lot as professionals. And I think leaders and managers that really are proactive with creating those great learning experiences and make sure people have gotten something out of them are standing out versus ones that are either just assuming it's happening or really not paying attention.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. Um, then, what is the role of the company as company training these individuals in a technical position that eventually transfer those skills to a managerial project manager position? What's the company role there? Is it all on the individual, the employee, to develop those skills? Does the company create a program or something that will help them develop those skills? I'm just kind of curious from your experience, what's the role of a company in that situation?
Well, I mean, I think the company's vested interest in their survival is to always have that next generation wanting to do more and take on more. And if they're, not owned by business people, right? I mean, if they're sort of the average company that is privately owned by your principals, there's some ownership there. It's for their benefit, right? If I'm an owner of a company, I need to create buyers of that company. And if I want to be a legacy company and have an internal transfer, I basically have to help develop the people who will buy me out. Like that's the long game. So it is in their best interest. And if they can't develop the people who will buy them out and want to stick around and build on the legacy that they're creating, well, they're going to have to sell out. They're going to have to sell up. They're going to have to do a close shop. So it's in their interest for their sustainability to do that. And all that being said, is you can bring a horse to water, but you can't get the horse to drink. And so the more that individuals are showing the interest, and technically, again, early part of our career, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. Although I will say this next generation is very much in tune with business and entrepreneurialism. So I think versus previous generations where maybe they were just locked in technically and, well, I don't need to know that. I think this new generation is a lot more technically savvy and business savvy. So I think you can kind of bring them into the fold a little earlier if there's some transparency about the business, what makes the business work. But I think it is, I think a firm that isn't investing in that next generation really is limiting their choices moving forward. So I think there's an organizational role, but there's also, the people have to want it and see that opportunity. But also from a client perspective, right? If I'm a client hiring a firm, this firm is not investing in that next generation, not doing training and development, am I going to hire them for a real big project? Am I going to feel comfortable with them? And maybe if I really know the people working on them, but I'll feel a lot better if I even know that the firm X and firm, versus firm X versus firm Y is really investing in training and development, and their people are talking about it. That's a great vibe for a client to have. So I think there's an obligation, but it's like any meaningful relationship. It has two parties participating, and creating the win-win.
Yeah, that's super interesting that you mentioned that it's also a benefit for the company in terms of finding maybe clients that are invested in companies that are showing progress and showing that they're growing in the industry, as well as companies that are really investing in their people, making sure they are well trained, that they will handle situations with a lot of ownership and a lot of really knowledgeable position. um, what's the flip side? What about the engineer that is trying to get to that position? What are some ways they can develop those skills, like volunteering, maybe pursuing something on the side, finding conferences, finding events, networking? What are some of these things that they can do to really progress in their careers? And I think ultimately just have a more fulfilling and find passion in what they're doing.
Mm. Well, I think it's, there's a lot more opportunity today than, just with LinkedIn, right? And connecting with people and podcasts. I think there's a lot more easily accessible information. And I will say, you know, take in as much as you can, as far as learning. And don't, there's this, we want to, if we want to have a successful career, and our careers can span 50 years. You have to think of like our early 20s, and people are 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 working well into their 70s. That's 50-year career. So what we learned at any given time is going to change, right? Things are going to change. So I think we always have to be learning. I think networks, we could rely on our company for certain things. Um, it's hit or miss now. I think if you work for a great
Mhm.
company, you can rely on them for some training. But I think getting involved with industry events, networking groups is super important. I think gone, or before, there used to be a hierarchy, and the power was in the hierarchy. And I think, now the power is in the ecosystems and networks. And so there's just such a great lateral network that even if you are just aware of what's happening in the industry, I think that is going to be key for you taking control of your career as a young person. More and more, branding is important. Like, who do I want to be associated with? And that's where, and that's like on a professional sense. What firms are doing what's the impact that they're having, through the projects that they're doing, but also what impact are they having beyond the work that we're paid to do? That's sort of the most advanced form of strategic planning I do with clients is, well, once we have a business strategy, once we've worked on our culture, diversity, our innovation and sustainability, how about we really make an impact beyond our projects and into our communities? And so, whether we're making widgets or designing bridges or designing water plants or designing, highway systems, what else are we doing? And the most advanced firms are really involved with that corporate impact. But it ties to their strategy. It ties to a lot of what they really authentically want to do. But and if your firm's not in that situation, I think to some degree it's probably just a matter of time, because that's the way society is moving and that's the expectations of business. But I think, just to answer your question, as far as getting involved in volunteering, I personally benefited from this, you know to work with something like an Engineers Without Borders, or to work, in another nonprofit. there is immense management and leadership capabilities and mindset shifts that happen when you can work in different domains. And one of the sort of the epiphanies that I had working in that space is even some of the biggest social challenges that we have, the engineer mindset, the technical professional mindset of problem solving, analyzing, is such a value to the social sector. And so, if we bring our sort of natural technical skill set and now have a mind and a heart for what's going on the social side, I think that's a pretty powerful combination. And so, as technical professionals, we can really grow and have a big impact if we also, you know, leverage and volunteer in the nonprofit space. But that's where firms that really want to make a real difference, just our day to day, how we think about things can make a huge difference in
Mhm.
our communities. And we just have to make that connection.
Yeah, I think that's super true. And something that just came to mind is what's like you obviously talk with a lot of CEOs, a lot of owners of companies through your network, through your podcast, and everything. What's like the general view of a younger engineer that is doing a lot of volunteering, doing a lot of things on the side beyond work, and they're trying to bring those skills into work? What is that kind of general view of kind of an owner looking at a younger engineer doing all these things and ultimately benefiting the company?
I mean, I see it from a few different perspectives. One is, um, there's the mindset of, well, that's a nice to have, and it probably helps you, but don't let it get in the way of your day job, right? And then there's the mindset of, I understand that that's important to you if that helps you grow and develop, and you can directly leverage those skills here, and that makes you more of a whole person, and you're leveraging it that here. Yes, that is a benefit to me. I think there's a concern sometimes that we get diluted. If we don't have the big picture, like why am I doing this, and what role does my career have? I think there's a hard time. We have a harder time, and being an older professional in the industry now, like, there's so many of us that have sacrificed a lot to get to where we are. And it's hard for you to see someone who's maybe not sacrificing as much as you did. And so we have to get over that mindset. And I think it truly, I think the real benefit, if you want to get the most mileage out of that, is to always be cognizant of how is what I'm doing outside of work increasing my ability to produce within work. If it's team development work, and always making that connection, I think is going to be key. But I think that there's some hurdles. I think there still are leaders that don't get it. And because they haven't been taught it, they haven't experienced themselves, and they've sacrificed a ton to get to where they are. And so I think, being if you're having that experience, and I'm a huge advocate of it, it's, don't separate it. Actually share, like, well, because I'm involved with this nonprofit, here's how we're dealing with this, and here's the connection, and here's how it helps me do my job better. Because I think unless you're doing so much outside of work that it is really distracting you in work, I think the right combination is only making work better. And so the more we can share about it and make that connection, I think the more leaders are saying, yeah, let's do more of that. And then the firm's focus might shift on that, because I think it's a huge learning. I mean, you can project manage and get real tangible experience in the nonprofit sector years before you could do that on a project. And so
Mhm.
you're still, and in fact, I think it's harder in many ways to succeed in the nonprofit sector than it is in the for profit sector, because we don't have the power of position. We don't have the power of a salary. We don't have the hierarchy to lean on. Like, you're going to do it because I told you to, and I'm your boss. We're dealing with volunteers. We're dealing with really what's the mission, and how, you're giving extra time. So, leaders who are dialed into really, what is the mission, the vision, the values, what impact are we trying to have? If we can leverage that on the workplace, that's going to be key. because obviously nonprofits, that's all they have to work with. They don't have a big salary and that type of thing, and they're asking volunteers to invest their time and their knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting point that you make. 'Cause I do a lot of volunteering with Engineers Without Borders and ASE and SEI. But the funny thing is with Engineers Without Borders, I've been working in projects, going to developing countries, managing projects for 6, 7 years now, and writing reports, talking to the NGOs at the countries we're working in, talking with the volunteers, doing kind of all these things that are really expected from a project manager as someone that only has 3 4 years of experience in the industry, but I'm having all these experiences through volunteering, again working in hard conditions, sometimes just finding really creative solutions to implement a simple project at a very remote location in Bolivia, or just simply trying to get people to be active within the organization to actually do the work, and so we actually can travel. We need to fund ourselves, we need to do all of these things that are very business like, but for something that we're not really benefiting in terms of money. We're just volunteering our time, and ultimately I think getting really good experience. You also
But if
mentioned,
yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
but if you look at that on a 12-year arc of your career, you're building the skills, not only the skills, but you're building the confidence to
Yeah.
manage and lead that will pay off 5, 7, 8 years from now, right? And so if you had a boss who was like, well, that's taken away from the calculations and the spec writing you're supposed to be doing right now because I don't need you to worry about leadership and management. I need you to worry about technical, a little dramatic with this example. Then they're going to say, well, it's taking away from Luis's, productivity. But if you have a leader or manager that plays the long game with, wow, in another 5 years, when Luis becomes a project manager, if he wants to or she wants to take that route, you already have a lot of the skills, and so you're going to be that much more successful. You're making an investment. When does the payoff come? I mean, the payoff might is come immediately for those people you're helping, wherever you're helping them. The payoff comes immediately for your self-confidence and your knowledge. The payoff might come for the company in 3 years or 5 years. The payoff might come for you financially when you have that incentive compensation check, or you're able to manage larger projects faster than other people, is just down the road. So it is really taking the big picture view of what are we building here. And do we want success today? We want to maximize that success today. Well, that's okay. But if we're going to try to make sure we're as successful today as possible, but I'm also investing in my future and the firm's future by developing these skills, well, that's probably a better or a best case scenario in my opinion.
Yeah, and that exactly leads me to like the next question I had is, do you think the entrepreneurial mindset of the owner of a company really comes into place in this scenario? And I mean, in someone that may have started the company itself, rather than someone that may have just grow in the company in a technical position, just really honing those technical skills, growing it within the company, and ultimately becoming to the CEO, the owner of the company. Where does two situations come into play here, as well as just the entrepreneurial mindset of someone looking at a young engineer doing all these things and how can ultimately benefit the company at the end of the day?
Well, I mean, I think the DNA to start a company is very different than the DNA to become an employee. I think
Mhm.
there's something. We we have the entrepreneurial bug. We have the risk taking. Um, we have the drive to work when other people want to watch Netflix. I mean, there's something in us. We there's that I think people who have started firms have that people who just want to be employees, and there's no judgment on that. I think there's just something it's innate.
Mhm.
I think if you have that entrepreneurial DNA, and even if someone's 50, 60, 65, 70 years old, they will recognize it in someone who's 25. I mean, I think you can recognize that and empower it. And I think you can grow it. If I look back on my career, I mean, as a young person, I was entrepreneurial. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I mean, back in the day, you could do this. I mean, I remember in being mad that I had to wait till sixth grade to get a paper route. You know,
Mhm.
and I was like, I had to wait a certain, and the day I turned that right age, I went down and I signed up for a paper route. And because I wanted my own money to buy records with, like, you know what I mean? Like it was back, you know. And so, and when I was, you know, thinking about like, I want to own a business, I want, so if I look back, now I enjoyed being an employee, but I always had these other thoughts. And I think, but at the same time, I know people who have become entrepreneurial and didn't know they had it, they didn't recognize it, but if they think back, it was there. So I think, you know, there's also, you know, and if you're not, you know, starting a company, there are different generations of company, right? So you start a company and you've got 10, 20, 50 employees. That entrepreneur with a 100-person firm is a much different entrepreneur than with a 20-person firm. And the entrepreneur that has a 100-person firm is very different than 150 and different than 200-person firm. We have to, you know, even if our personality doesn't change, I mean, the way we behave has to change, our processes and systems. Where in the early days, maybe we could make it happen ourselves, so to speak. But it quickly gets to a point where our success is about making other people succeed. And our ego has to get turned, you know, towards a humility of, you know, an investment in other people. And I think, you know, so maybe I'm going off topic with your question here, but I think you know, if you're an engineer or a young professional that has that entrepreneurial spirit, I think aligning with the current leaders at the time who have that entrepreneurial spirit, and is going to be helpful. I think there also are successful people in our organizations who are more managers, right? They're protecting what's been built, and that is essential because we need all people. You know, we need the people who are growing tomorrow's success today, and we need people who are taking care of the shop. And so, but if you're an entrepreneurial person who's working for someone who's taking care of the shop, there could be some friction, unless, you know, as we talk through it. So I think it is sort of, and that's where it gets into the mentorship and understanding, you know, what really drives people. Because in a healthy organization of a substantial size, I mean, you do want people who are very administrative, very process oriented. You want people who are great managers, and you want people who are entrepreneur. Like today's not good enough. How about tomorrow? And so you really need those entrepreneurial types, and we all have to work together in a very functional soup. But there's really not never one size fits all because people do have to take care of today while investing in tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's totally true, and I really appreciate your point of view. And again, we could keep talking about these for days and never really reach the end. But just your perspective from someone that talks with CEOs, that talks is in the environment of that generation, um, as compared to where I'm at, and most of the audience of this podcast is just more young engineers trying to figure out what it takes to become a leader, what it takes to progress in their careers, find that career that's fulfilling. So I really appreciate that point of view, and just kind of giving us a glance of what's the perspective of a CEO, the owner of the company, in terms of how engineers or younger engineers can really develop into what they want to become later in their careers. Do you have any last piece of advice for anyone just trying to develop and just find a fulfilling career?
Oh, I mean, I think again we talked about. I mean, definitely, it's going to take work. I mean, what we do matters. What we do is hard. It's important. It's a reason why, you know, engineers and architects and technical professionals are, you know, have certain standing in society. So it does take work. The one thing too is I think there is a, you know, there's generational differences, and that doesn't mean it's bad. I think it's just it's understanding that, you know, if the older generation, and you can even break this in this the whole, you know, the digital natives versus the analogs, you know, with the demarcation being 35 years and younger, sort of have grown up with the machines and have a
Mhm.
real digital experiences, understand technology, aren't intimidated by it. And anyone over 35 is like, well, it's just technology's adjunct to my life and I can do with it or not. And it's somewhat stressful. And at the end of the day, I can maybe do without it. And let's just go whiteboard this thing together and sketch it out. I think there's where technology is going, digital design, I think people who are 40, 50, 60 years old who aren't embracing someone who's 25 or 30, we're going to lose out. And I think someone who's 25 to 30 years old who doesn't understand that we used to do things before CAD and it worked. And we're geared towards that. And, we like to collaborate. And, we're not always technically or digitally savvy. If there's a little bit of grace on the newer employees and a little bit of grace on our older professionals, I think we're going to be so much better together. But we really can't get frustrated with each other because I think, not only is there generational differences, I think the digital divide is huge, and firms that are embracing that and bringing generations together. So, when we advance BIM into digital twins, and our infrastructure are basically assembly, like our design and construction are assembly lines, just like there is in manufacturing, right? I mean, play that out 10 years. The 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 professionals that will help us really navigate BIM and some of these advanced technologies are probably under 30 today. If we're discounting them, well, we're not going to advance as far as fast as other people. But at the same time, if there's people who have 5 to 10 years worth of experience who do not have the judgment, they haven't been through the stuff that happens to know that they know that they know that this is right, and are discounting someone with 30, 35 years experience, they're just playing a video game and they're not building sustainable infrastructure. And so I think we need each other more than ever. And the generational gap is sort of magnified a little bit today with the I like almost every organization I've worked with, we think we're in the shape of a pyramid where there's kind of leadership at top. I mean, to me, I like the idea of the inverted pyramid. But if we just think of the pyramid, there's leadership at top, and then there's managers, and then there's the sort of the technical professionals at the bottom. More of them. Most organizations in our industry today is not really the shape of a pyramid; it's the shape of an hourglass, and that's because people with 10 to 50 years experience really are few and far between, partly because of the Great Recession that happened 10 to 15 years ago. They
Mhm.
didn't come in our industry, or they left our industry, and they're not here now. And so the divide between generations, I think, is stark, because we have a lot of people with north of 20 years experience, and we have a lot of people with 10 years or less experience. That middle part that would translate is just not there, or they're overworked and burning out and not cannot take on more. And so there really is this need for younger folks and more experienced folks to come together. um, and if it was, even without the digital divide, we would have to come together anyway, but the digital divide makes it that much more important. So I would think on both sides of the spectrum that we will be a better industry, we will have a better firm, and we will have a better career the more we can learn from both sides of this, from the full spectrum of our talent.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and something that we need to do. I think a better job at just having an open mind in both the more experienced engineer and the young engineer to really find that middle ground where we can all coexist and truly develop something together. So I know there's a lot of great topics that we could explore there, but I just want to just end this episode and just acknowledge for your work, all the things you do with your podcast, with your company, your coaching, everything. And I really appreciate just following you online and connecting with you and having the opportunity to chat with you. I just have one last question, and that's how can we continue engineering our future?
Engineering our future, I mean, have a plan, right? I mean, think about, I mean, one of the things that we, as technical professionals, I don't think we really make plans and then follow through and check in with those plans. I think we can get busy really fast and we don't check in. So I think having the margin time to really critically and strategically think about the future um, that we want, and really understand where we stand right now, and then create that path. I think that's going to be key. And sometimes, we can get so busy, we can lose a year. You could lose a decade. And so really understand what you're looking for in life. And I would say recognize seasons. There's work seasons. I've mentioned them. There's make a name or master your craft, make a name, and then make a difference and leave a legacy. But at the same time, I mean, we're humans. And so, what if we want to explore things outside of work, well, put them on the plan. If we're in a family season, if we've chosen that route, like enjoy that, because as someone who's empty nesting, it goes by fast. I mean, it seems, but it goes, enjoy that. And so make a plan. Like there are certain seasons where flexibility is going to be absolutely imperative. And I think more and more we want to win at work and win at life. And younger people can do it now. Older people are catching up for it. But I think it's make a plan for life, make a plan for work. And there's some degree of balance, but I think it's more about integration. How are we going to integrate what it means to be successful as a human, what it means to be successful as a brother, a sister, a parent, a son, daughter, and as an employee and as a team leader. And so really taking time to understand what it is. And I'll say this, I think there's a lot of work we can do to have a better to-do list of what we want to accomplish, and learn to delegate, learn to automate, learn to, not do this thing because it's really not that urgent or important. But I think there's this other element with creating a to-be list. Who do we want to be? Not just who do we want to be at work, who do we want to be, for our team, who do we want to be for our clients? Who do I want to be at home? Who do I want to be in my community? And have that right front and center in addition to what I want to do and what I want to have accomplished. And I think that is late breaking information for maybe Gen X and boomers. Like we arrived at that position somehow in our 40s and 50s. But I think for the younger generation, it's sort of baked in the cake, but own it and articulate it and write it out. And that's how you can have we can have the future of our choosing, but it will not happen by accident. And it will not happen without work and planning it and thinking about it, which we're predisposed to do because we are problem solvers and critical thinkers when we put the time in to do so. And I think the world needs more of us, and but at the same time, we could benefit from our own skills and knowledge and have the life and career in the future we want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super true, and definitely a lot of wisdom in those words, and hopefully other people can really take this whole episode, this whole conversation, and really develop that career plan, the things they want to be doing in the future, and develop those skills that will help them ultimately get there. So again, thank you, Peter, for coming to the podcast, for just sharing all the knowledge with us. Where can people connect with you, find you online, and just network with you?
So actionsprove.com is my website. You can connect with me on that or see the material. But LinkedIn, I mean, that's where I spend pretty much all of my social media time is on LinkedIn. So you can find me there. And I just want to say, thank you for your kind words. I want to say I really appreciate what you're doing and the impact that you're making in the industry with your podcast. I truly appreciate it. And, when we connected, I am a big fan of you and what you're doing. And so I'm honored to be on your podcast, and, for a lot of reasons. And just to let people know, it's little side hustle, side gigs. Podcasting is not easy. It's a lot of work. And so, kudos to you for doing it. And I hope all the listeners who enjoy your podcast realize that there's a lot that goes into these. And so I appreciate it. And it's been an honor to talk with you and be able to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Definitely, it's a lot of work, but at the end of the day, it's enjoyable. Get to connect with people like you and just have conversations that are really meaningful, and hopefully just showing other people the great things that other engineers are doing in our industry. So thanks so much for coming to the podcast, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Excellent.